What if a murderer's fate could be decided by something as banal as a slice of pizza? You heard right. A forgotten bite. A chewed-up piece. A ridiculous, almost comical detail, but one that became the final trap for one of America's most ruthless predators. The safest place in the world was to see him behind bars. But until he got there, he walked among us. He smiled. He had barbecues in the backyard. He fixed cars for the neighbors. He was a father. He was a husband. He was the ordinary man no one would ever suspect. And meanwhile, the alleys of Los Angeles hid abandoned bodies. Young women scarred by gunshot wounds to the chest, discarded like trash. The air was permeated with fear. The suffocating silence of those who knew something was wrong but couldn't put a name to it. Have you ever felt that strange vertigo? Of looking at someone seemingly harmless and thinking, what if I don't actually know this person? That's how the spiral begins. Normalcy becomes a disguise. Routine becomes a mask. And behind the mask, only emptiness remains. It was the void that guided Lonnie Franklin. The serial killer the press dubbed Grim Sleeper, an ironic nickname because he didn't sleep. He just paused. He'd disappear for years only to return, darker, bolder. And each return was a death sentence for anyone who crossed his path. And this is where the mystery takes its breath away. Because the FBI, the detectives, the undercover investigations, no one could touch him. The DNA was there. The bullets were there. But the name, the face, remained untouched, as if the entire city were complicit in his silence. And then, the irony came. The contradiction that seems to have come from a nightmare written by criminal psychology itself. Decades of deaths, a monster hiding in the open, and what finally gave him away wasn't the genius of an investigative mind. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a grand mistake. It was a pizza. A slice forgotten in a diner. A hunk of dough covered in sauce, cheese, and saliva. This grotesque, almost laughable detail was the key that unlocked the abyss. And here's the psychological twist. The greatest secrets, the most hidden crimes, fall not by the weight of genius, but by the banality of human carelessness. Evil often is not defeated by force. It is defeated by ridicule, by weakness, by what it never imagined would matter. Can you feel the tension? Because what's about to be revealed isn't just the story of a serial killer. It's the anatomy of the shadow that hides behind the most ordinary appearance. It's the dirty secret that should never have come to light. And in the end, when a bite of pizza decides the fate of a killer, you realize that no mask lasts forever. But be careful. What you're about to discover next could change the way you look at any neighbor, any stranger, even the person sitting next to you at a pizzeria. Now, take a deep breath, because this story is just beginning. Did you realize what just happened here? A slice of pizza, something so banal, opened the door to one of the darkest secrets in criminal history. What if I told you there are other cases like this, buried in secret reports, hidden in FBI files, just waiting for the right look to be revealed? This is where I need you. Your every entry isn't just a click. It's fuel for this investigation to continue, so that forbidden secrets, forgotten recordings, and disturbing contradictions don't go unnoticed. If you feel like this story spoke to your curiosity, to that pain that seeks answers even when you know there might not be any, then subscribe now. Because what comes next is not light. There is a recording, never shown to the public. There is a confession, which never matched the evidence. There is a void, which only opens when you go deeper. Subscribe. Because the next secret is already waiting. The cold light of the cell always seems more cutting when the silence weighs heavily. And in that silence, before the half-open door was closed forever, he did not tremble. An ordinary man. A father. A neighbor who smiled at the market. But he carried with him something that could not be seen on the surface. The world only knew him as the family profile killer. In the press, it gained another name, crueler, more cinematic, BTK, bind, torture, kill. Entire decades of crimes, of lives crushed in perverse rituals, of families torn apart by a shadow that seemed to have no face. From 1974 until the 1990s, the sequence of bodies left not only the police confused, but the community itself in ruins. And the most disturbing thing was not just the number of victims, but the invisible impact. The entire city was transformed into a theater of paranoia, where every locked door seemed fragile, every neighbor seemed suspicious. The fear came not just from death, but from uncertainty. Of the red line that crossed the lives of ordinary people, without warning, without apparent logic. He watched. He was writing. And then it disappeared. Meanwhile, mothers could no longer sleep. Fathers lost the courage to let their children play in the street. The crime here was not just physical. It was psychological. It was a collective transformation, the mindset of an entire city shaped by the weight of a ghost that had no name. And deep down that was his true power. The power to alter daily decisions, to install a fear that grew like mold on the walls. But you know what bothers me the most? It was impossible to recognize him. A civil servant. A man who spoke about religion, about morality. Who led neighborhood meetings. The banality of evil hid behind common gestures, common clothes, a seemingly common life. And this contradiction, this chasm between the man who tended the yard and the monster who planned rituals, is what makes the mind tremble. The FBI had hidden investigations, secret reports, false leads laid like traps. And still nothing seemed enough. Because how do you trap a shadow that moves as if it were part of the city itself? The behind-the-scenes investigation reveals something even more painful. Errors of judgment, innocent suspects, lives destroyed not only by the killer, but by the very search for the hidden truth. The impact was twofold: victims of blood, and victims of doubt. And then one tiny, almost ridiculous detail changed everything. It wasn't DNA found at a brutal scene. It was not a confession extracted under interrogation. It was a slice of pizza forgotten in the middle of a banal day. A piece of food discarded in the trash became the key. And this, perhaps, is the greatest psychological blow. Years of control, manipulation, terror, dismantled by something so everyday that it almost seems like a cruel joke of fate. But make no mistake, this apparent outcome brings no relief. He just opens another half-open door with cold light streaming through the gap, showing what no one wanted to see. Because when they finally arrested him, they didn't just find a man. They found a mind that kept diaries, files, detailed accounts of each victim, notes on fantasies that had not yet been realized. And the most disturbing revelation was not in the crimes he had committed, but in the crimes he was still planning. The devastating effect was not just on those who died. It was about who survived knowing they could have been next. About families who were never able to walk around their own home without feeling an invisible weight. About entire communities forever marked by a name that should never have existed. And here's the contradiction no one expected. When he spoke, he didn't sound like a monster. Seemed normal. The calm voice, the cold reasoning, the conviction that each decision had been planned with almost bureaucratic logic. And perhaps this is the darkest aspect of serial killer psychology, the fine line between what we call normality and what we call absolute evil. The banality hidden behind the everyday mask. Do you feel it? That restlessness that creeps inside your chest? It is the reminder that there is no wall high enough, nor lock strong enough, when evil wears the mask of routine. And that's where the real, sure fear that keeps you hooked on the story lies, not knowing how far the shadow goes. But no one imagined that this would be just the beginning. The first time they opened those dusty boxes of files, no one expected to find anything more than dead papers, lifeless reports, forgotten testimonies, clues that led nowhere. But at the bottom of each page there was an almost invisible trail, a red line stitching together stories that seemed isolated. It was as if, for years, the truth had been there, only camouflaged under layers of carelessness, errors of judgment, and the deliberate silence of those who never wanted to face reality. Younger detectives looked at the papers and couldn't understand how it had gone unnoticed. Experts in criminal behavior saw patterns where previously there were none. And some former police officers who had already retired began to reappear in the meeting rooms, like ghosts who had never left the case. The weight of that wasn't just professional. It was personal. Every face in the photos, every poorly completed report, brought back the impact that never healed. An open-wound, poorly sutured, still throbbing under the cold light of the offices. In the beginning, the police mentality was simple: isolated crimes. Murders distant in time, in different places, with no apparent connection. Decisions made in a hurry. Archived reports to clean up statistics. But a closer, almost intimate look was enough to perceive the cruel symmetry that united each case. The moorings, the intervals, the silent signature that was not in the scene but in its absence. As if the criminal wanted not only to kill but to erase. Reduce people to nothing as if they never existed. And this is where the controversy starts to get annoying. Because it wasn't just the killer's intelligence that kept him free for so long. It was also human error. The behind-the-scenes investigation reveals inflated egos, disputes between departments, and poor decisions that cost the families years of pain. The hidden truth is not just one man's cruelty. It is the silent complicity of a system that preferred to believe the most convenient version. Until a new technology entered the scene. DNA, once a distant promise, was now capable of stitching together invisible threads between cases that lay dormant in closed drawers. A microscopic strand of hair. A trace of saliva. A banal detail, discarded for decades, became the key to an irreversible transformation. And so, each genetic strand became like a half-open door, allowing the cold light to reveal what was hidden. Each sample collected was not just a piece of evidence. It was a revelation. A breath of truth pushing against years of lies. But nothing was immediate. Before getting to the pizza slice, there were endless nights of frustration, sifting through databases that didn't match, creating psychological profiles that seemed incomplete, listening to testimonies that contradicted each other. It was like putting together a puzzle with missing pieces, knowing the final image would be too disturbing to see all at once. And then a pattern began to emerge. Dates that didn't coincide for nothing. Letters sent to the newspaper with details that only the killer could know. The almost childish need to be recognized, mixed with the arrogance of believing that he would never be caught. Each revelation was a stab not only to the victims, but to the investigators themselves, who began to wonder how they could have been manipulated for so long. With each analysis, it became clearer that someone was silently preying on women. Someone who moved through the routine, who worked, prayed, smiled at neighbors, and returned home with his mind drowned in rituals of control and death. It wasn't just a predator. It was a shadow with a human face. And this realization, more than any physical evidence, was what began to corrode the police behind the scenes. Because if a man like that could go unnoticed for decades, what does that say about all the others who were never discovered? The case is no longer just an investigation. It became an uncomfortable mirror. And as the team moved forward, between revelations and contradictions, they realized they were facing something bigger than a killer. They were faced with a mind that transformed normality itself into a weapon. And the most disturbing part was yet to come. There was a city that breathed fear even before knowing the name of the monster. The 80s carried a dirty fever, streets consumed by crack, violence throbbing on every corner, houses with half-open doors that feigned security while hiding despair. The cold light from the streetlights provided little illumination, just enough to cast shadows that seemed more vivid than the people walking beneath them. It was a time of social transformation, but not in the sense that the word usually promises. Transformation here was deterioration. It was the fabric of the community tearing apart, thread by thread, until only fear remained. In that scenario, police decisions were quick, almost automatic. Bodies found in poor neighborhoods didn't make shocking headlines. Missing women were reduced to statistics as if their lives had no real weight. The system, intoxicated by chaos, missed what should have been seen. And it was in this space between carelessness and indifference that the shadow grew stronger. Do you understand? The hidden truth is not just the killer. It is the fertile ground that fed it. It is the collective mentality that believed that some lives were worth less than others. This is the red line that runs beneath each case. Social injustice as a silent accomplice to individual cruelty. The first victims appeared like this, as if they were an inevitable part of the scenario. Names that no one repeated. Stories that didn't make the front pages of newspapers. And each body bore not just signs of violence but a kind of coded message. A signature that lay not in the obvious but in the detail. Handmade bows. Calculated positions. A morbid, almost artistic care that revealed a desire to be seen even while remaining hidden. The psychological impact of this was devastating but silent. Residents began to distrust their neighbor. Mothers began locking windows even on sunny afternoons. There was a feeling that the city was being watched, that a half-open door was the perfect invitation for the next disappearance. And this atmosphere was not only born from the fear of crime, but from the silence of the police. Behind the scenes marked by omissions, poorly completed reports, revelations that never reached the public. Every day the distance between the truth and the official version grew, and with it the feeling that no one was really protected. The cruelest thing is that collective indifference was part of the game. As violence unfolded in dark alleys, the killer walked in the cold light, confident that no one would truly see him. He didn't need to hide so much. Social chaos was their camouflage. And so, a routine of death was being built piece by piece without the world noticing. The devastated families received no answers. Photographs of missing people were stuck to posts, glued with tape that fell apart in the rain. And the eyes of the relatives revealed more than pain. They revealed the unease of being invisible to the very system that should protect them. It was an unbearable weight, carrying grief and neglect at the same time. And here the most disturbing contradiction arises. With each body found, there was not only horror. There was also a strange order. A cold pattern. As if each death were part of a private narrative written just for him. It wasn't just crime. It was an act. And the way the bodies were found revealed a signature that no one dared admit. Feel this for a moment. You're not just watching. You're entering the cold corridors of the mind that no one has dared to decipher. Every detail, every shadow, every silence you perceive, carries a weight that many have ignored. And here, in this almost sacred moment, I want you to do something with me. It's no ordinary request. It's a silent gesture. A way of leaving your presence in this space of pain and curiosity. Write a word. A single word that represents what you felt when you imagined that macabre signature left on the bodies, that cold light that warmed nothing. It could be fear, injustice, silence, guilt, or anything else that makes your chest tighten. It's a ritual. An outburst. A sigh that passes through the screen and reaches those who are also reflecting on it. Why does this matter? Because these words are like echoes. They show that no one is alone in this labyrinth of dark thoughts. They create a bridge between you, me, and everyone trying to understand the incomprehensible. Each comment is a fragment of shared truth. A small revelation of who we are when we face the forbidden. And as you type, think, do you feel closer to what should remain distant, or more distant from what needs to be understood? A look can be welcoming. The same look can be threatening. Choose the word that carries your truth. Let it float. The ritual is simple yet powerful. There's no right or wrong here. Just the need to be seen, to leave a fragment of yourself in the same space where we unravel the killer's mind. A gesture that connects those who observe, those who feel, and those who silently survive the horror. And so, as his words take shape on the screen, the story doesn't stop. It continues to pulse, to reveal itself. Each comment is a thread that brings us closer to the next layer of mystery, to that secret we haven't yet dared reveal. So write. A word. A fragment. An echo. A shared sigh. And see how even in the silence, we are all together facing what no one should face but which somehow needs to be felt. The air seemed heavier that day. Every footstep in the police station corridors sounded like a drumbeat announcing the inevitable. There was a palpable tension, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets no one dared record. The first victims appeared like blurred shadows in the city's memory, women disappearing amidst the daily chaos, their stories fading into the routine of streets infested with neon, violence, and indifference. And even when someone finally noticed, something about the circumstances gave the police pause, the feeling they were dealing with something bigger, something that couldn't be explained with statistics or reports alone. The researchers were exhausted but fascinated. There was something in this killer's mindset that defied all logic, a hidden truth that seemed to slip through their fingers even in the face of the most concrete evidence. The first connecting thread came with DNA analysis, a small detail no one had noticed before. The ballistics and the locations where the bodies were dumped began to form a pattern, almost artistic, cruel, calculated. It was as if each crime carried an invisible signature, a mark that only the most obsessed mind could perceive. But the emotional impact of this discovery went far beyond forensic science. Families torn apart, communities paralyzed by fear, and researchers grappling with their own vulnerability in the face of the unknown. And this is where the spiral slowly unfolds, revealing layers no one had been able to see. The predator seemed to disappear, but his shadow remained. The police believed the crimes had stopped, until new bodies turned up. And with each new death, the realization that the killer was still at large grew more intense, more penetrating, leaving invisible scars on all who allowed themselves to imagine what would happen if it were them. Stay with me until the end. It's not just a request, it's a promise. Because what you'll see ahead isn't just another case, it's revelations that shake up how we understand vulnerability, the red line lurking in every human decision, the backstage of a mind that transforms as impunity continues. Stay with me until the end, and I'll show you not only the connections the police found, but also the secrets that never appeared in the official reports. Every detail, every clue, every suspicion carries a psychological weight that you'll feel, not just see. As the evidence accumulated, patterns emerged with disturbing clarity. A detail here, another there, a coincidence no one would dare call random. Each connection reinforced the idea that we were dealing with a meticulously calculated mind, someone who understood the impact of their decisions, the psychological effect they had on everyone around them. And in the silence of the analysis, amidst cold lights and half-open doors, reality and interpretation blurred. A researcher stared at the maps and records, wondering if what he saw was the truth or merely an interpretation skewed by the horror he felt. Meanwhile, the predator remained invisible yet discernible. Each new body was a reminder that the red line had never disappeared, that the killer's mental transformation continued silently but lethally. And even with all the evidence, one feeling persisted. The greatest danger lay not in the crimes already committed, but in what he could yet reveal, in the decisions yet to be made, behind the scenes of a mind that defied all human comprehension. And you who observe and feel this tension, realize something curious. It's not just about the victims or the killer. It's about us. About the fascination with the forbidden, the disturbing empathy, the silent pain of imagining it could be you or someone you love. And it's this connection that makes every detail more intense, every revelation more shocking, every shadow more unsettling. So look at these lines, each name and each entry. Feel the weight. Breathe. And remember, stay with me until the end. Because the story that still unfolds holds hidden archives, contradictions no one has dared reveal, and a hidden truth that only those who allow themselves to follow it to the very last thread will understand. The predator was still at large. And he had never left. Every clue, every DNA fragment, every memory fragment connected in a web that seemed impossible to fully decipher. But the feeling, the psychological impact, the silent transformation of everyone involved in this case, it was real. And as you feel the depth of the red line, the cold light that pierces every corridor of the investigation, you understand, there is more to come. And you are about to discover that, amidst it all, there is something no one has ever imagined. The silence that night was denser than anything she could imagine. The empty street, lit only by a cold light that flickered on the asphalt, carried a red streak that seemed to whisper through the shadows. She walked quickly, unaware that her steps would be studied, calculated, observed. The cold wasn't just physical, it was psychological, an invisible weight that accumulated in every gesture, in every decision made in that instant. The transformation that would occur in seconds wouldn't be just hers, but everyone who witnessed the trail it would leave. She heard something behind her, a soft, almost imperceptible crack. Her heart raced, her mind went into overdrive, and in that moment, every beat seemed to echo off the city walls. The decisions you make when you sense imminent danger are different from the ones you believe you make. It's mentality versus instinct. She ran. A car moved silently, its wheels scraping gently on the wet cobblestones. There wasn't just fear, there was awareness, an awareness that every second could be her last. And it was on that tenuous line between life and death that she saw the first face. Calm, cold, almost banal, but charged with a hidden truth that no investigator could have immediately guessed. The escape was visceral. She stumbled, felt the impact of the ground, but got up, driven by something that transcends rational explanation. The need to survive, to preserve her own existence amidst a world that seemed conspiring against her. The vehicle quickly disappeared into the shadows, and in that instant, the experience became a milestone in the investigation. A living witness, a tangible connection to something that previously existed only in fragments of evidence, scattered evidence, signs that went unnoticed. Every detail she carried with her was a piece of revelation that would become a turning point. As the detectives analyzed her account, each word seemed to carry more weight than any technical report could convey. She described the car, the gestures, the manner of the man who now became more than an abstract figure. A concrete monster, almost too human for us to feel completely secure. The first face, the first glance, the cadence of his breathing, all details that fit together like pieces of a puzzle. But there was something even more disturbing, the killer's mind. He hadn't just committed crimes, he had constructed a theater of silent power, studying the psychological impacts, transforming each act into an experiment in fear and control. And it was in this detail, so small, almost imperceptible, that the detectives came within a few feet of the monster, without realizing it. The half-open garage door, the metallic gleam reflecting the cold light, the smell of burning oil and rubber. Each fragment seemed trivial, but when combined, they formed a pattern of hidden truth that only an obsessed mind could interpret. The city, oblivious to the red line, continued its daily flow, unaware of the danger's proximity. And you, watching with me, feel the tension rise because you know we are entering a backstage area where empathy for fear mingles with curiosity for the forbidden. As the survivor continues to tell her story in fragments, the police begin to realize that every detail of the escape, every hesitation, every glance exchanged with the attacker, was a thread of evidence that would lead them inexorably closer to the truth. But the truth, as always, hides in the shadows, in the gaps between what is said and what is felt, in the red lines the city tries to ignore. The psychological impact it carries is not limited to the account. It infiltrates the investigators, the community, and now you who follow this story as a silent confidant, witness to something that defies simple explanation. Each passing moment, each fragment of memory reconstructed, each file revisited, brings the investigation closer to a crucial point. But the killer's mind remains an enigma, a continuous transformation, calculating each move as if always a few steps ahead. And it is on this threshold between persecution and revelation that we find ourselves, staring into the abyss of a truth that has not yet been fully revealed. With every heartbeat, we feel the tension, the disturbing empathy, the safe voyeurism that grips and transforms us. The city continues, but the red line remains, and we, together, are about to cross another half-open door. The street was silent, but not peaceful. Every streetlight cast long, tortuous shadows across the peeling walls and half-open doors. The detectives knew, on some level, they were dangerously close. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, mixed with the discomfort of facing a truth that could never be completely controlled. 3 houses down, the suspect moved almost invisibly, as if every gesture were measured, every breath planned. There was a disturbing precision to his routine, a mentality that transformed the city into a chessboard and lives into pieces he manipulated effortlessly. For months, the investigation seemed like a maze with no exit. Every clue led to a dead end. Each witness, when interviewed, recalled only fragments mixed with fear and confusion. But in that moment, the researchers felt something different. A visceral intuition that drew them closer to the monster, still unnamed, still hidden beneath the mask of normalcy. The psychological impact of this proximity wasn't limited to the police. It seeped into every detail, every decision, every tense silence. And you, watching with me, feel your breath catch because you realize we are witnessing not only the hunt, but the danger of being just steps away from the unimaginable. They heard light footsteps, a door creaking. But the red line was treacherous. A shadow moved, and in the next instant, it vanished, leaving behind only the feeling that they had been there, so close, and lost everything by mere inches of luck. Every detail became a cruel lesson in the banality of evil. The proximity, the smell of routine, and the mask of an ordinary citizen. A car passing smoothly, an open window, a flickering light. Small fragments that, combined, would reveal a hidden truth, if only someone had the patience to observe. Days and nights passed, repeating the same pattern. Maps, files, DNA analyses that insisted on not providing the complete answer, reports that attempted to transform visceral reality into cold data. But the real impact lay behind the scenes in the human effort confronting the killer's mind. Every decision made in the investigation became a psychological game of approach and retreat. And in this game, any mistake could cost lives, any hesitation increased the red line, and every half-open door hid possibilities of discovery and disaster. The predator, for his part, remained silent, observing the world through small cracks, testing limits. He understood that tension, secure fear, and emotional uncertainty were weapons as effective as any physical violence. Every gesture, every movement, every sound in the city was analyzed through the lens of internal transformation. Absolute control, invisible manipulation. And while the police felt the frustration of nearly capturing him, he was already preparing for the next act, like a maestro conducting a symphony of silent terror. And then, like a blade cutting through the fog, came the police's near-fatal error. A chance missed, a detail overlooked, a door left ajar for too many seconds. It was as if fate had allowed a glimpse of the monster and then immediately closed the curtain again. The silence that followed was heavy with regret, with a disturbing sense of helplessness. Every investigator knew that proximity was lost in memory like an incomplete truth, leaving a psychological mark as profound as any physical evidence. There were years of silence, frustration, and endless nights spent revisiting files, maps, and reports in search of patterns. Until, amidst this darkness, a risky idea emerged, something that defied protocol, that blended risk and intuition, that promised not only to reveal clues but also to peer into the mind of a man who seemed untouchable. A decision that required courage, calculation, and, above all, an understanding of the mental transformation necessary to deal with the monstrosity they were about to face. The city remained indifferent, the streets lit by cold, intermittently flickering lights, and the red line seemed to hover over every corner. But the investigation, slow and fragmented, began to gain momentum. Each revisited file, each detail reviewed, each testimony re-examined, brought the police closer to a turning point no one dared foresee. And you, who are with me, feel the tension intensify, knowing that the next piece of the puzzle is not just a revelation, but an invitation to delve even deeper into a truth that refuses to be simplified. Every step taken by the police, every fragment of a clue, every glance cast by the survivor carried within it the promise of future revelations, of impacts that would transform our understanding of the case, of decisions that could forever alter the fine line between justice and chaos. And even now, while the predator remains invisible, the city continues to breathe and we continue to lurk, attentive to the risks, the details, the cold lights, hoping that the next half-open door will lead us even closer to answers that are simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. The city continued to breathe in silence, every noise becoming a warning, every shadow on the sidewalk a potential danger. Detectives reviewed old maps, electronic files, records that seemed like fragments of a larger mind, as if each document carried within it the restrained breath of someone observing everything unseen. The investigative mindset shifted at that moment. It wasn't just about searching for clues, but also about understanding the psychological impact of the lack of answers. Every lost minute echoed the lives that could have been saved. Every wrong decision, an invisible red line ready to explode. Then something changed. Technology became a silent, almost ethereal ally. Family DNA tracking files intertwined with public and private information, and analyses that previously seemed impossible began to connect. Small traces he had inadvertently left behind became maps of his routine, almost imperceptible signs of his presence. The city, which had previously seemed vast and chaotic, was now a labyrinth of revelations. And as the detectives delved into this sea of data, they began to realize that each fragment carried with it the hidden truth, that the predator had never been as distant as he seemed. A thin thread, a distant relative with a DNA match, revealed the first concrete bridge. It was a tiny, almost unnoticed connection, yet powerful enough to point to the ordinary man who had always been there, invisible, passing unnoticed among neighbors, co-workers, strangers. The name emerged with silent force. A construction worker, a neighbor who greeted everyone with quick, gentle waves, someone whose ordinary appearance hid a mind that planned and calculated every move with surgical coldness. The dissonance between public perception and his inner reality was almost cruel. Every everyday detail, every trivial gesture, now seemed charged with attention no one could have imagined. The city breathed indifferently as the detectives realized how close they were to the monster. But a cruel dilemma arose. How could they prove it without him knowing he was being hunted? How could they transform this invisible web of data and evidence into a concrete net that could capture him without causing him to escape, without arousing suspicion? Every decision became a calculation of risk, every movement a dance with the killer's mind, every analysis an attempt to anticipate steps he himself might not have even planned. The transformation of the investigation from instinct to technological precision seemed to bring with it an almost palpable hope, but also a growing tension that no one could ignore. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, life continued to move on. Street after street, ordinary people went about their days, unaware that, just blocks away, their routines were being monitored, cross-referenced, and interpreted. The cold light from the lamps reflected off the windows, as if projecting invisible silhouettes of the predator onto every wall. And you, watching with me, sense the psychological discomfort this provokes. The safe fear of witnessing without being directly involved, empathy mixed with curiosity that can't shake what unfolds before your eyes. The crux lay in the combination of technology and human intuition. Every database consulted, every tracking tool employed, was more than analysis. It was an attempt to understand the mind of the man who had gone unnoticed. He was dissonance itself, the balance between normality and monstrosity, and with each new connection made, the tension arose that they were about to touch the core of his psychological transformation. And yet, the capture could not be rushed. Patience became a weapon, and each move was calculated with the care of someone igniting gunpowder. And it was at that moment, amidst DNA analysis, data cross-referencing, and almost ghostly surveillance, that the detectives realized the pattern. He never truly strayed from his familiar surroundings, but rather blended into daily routines, the smallest gestures, the silent habits no one questioned. Each neighborhood, each street, each neighbor was part of a web that could only be unraveled by those willing to look beyond the surface. The revelation wasn't just about the suspect. It was about the psychological impact his presence had on everyone, invisible, constant, disturbing. And you feel it, don't you? The unease, the sensation of being faced with something greater than immediate comprehension. The tension isn't just the police's, it's ours too, silently growing with each connection made, each considered decision, each calculated risk. Every detail analyzed becomes a revelation that cuts through the mind like cold blades, revealing not only the logic of crime, but the complexity of the human mind, which can transform into the most predictable and, at the same time, the most unpredictable evil. And as if the narrative wanted to test their attention, a final layer emerged. The first concrete clues pointed to him, but direct knowledge was still far away. A tiny, almost imperceptible detail could unravel everything, or it could disappear if not addressed with surgical precision. And at that moment, as the detectives mapped out scenarios, cross-referenced information, and weighed risks, the urge arose to anticipate the final move. A risky step requiring courage and calculation, but one that could finally reveal the truth hidden behind years of silent terror. And it was at that precise moment, when the tension became almost unbearable, that the next move became inevitable. Technology had become the silent ally, but the final decision, the connection that could seal fate, still depended on intuition, courage, and the ability to understand the psychological impact of an ordinary man who transformed his routine into an invisible weapon. The city remained silent, the cold light reflected in the windows, and the red line loomed, constant, silent. Because now, finally, all the threads of the investigation were about to intertwine, leading the police, and us who watched in silence, to a confrontation with something that had always been hidden in plain sight. As you watch with me, noticing every shadow, every gesture, every detail the city tries to hide, there's something I need to tell you. It's not just about the investigation, nor about the man who's always been lurking. There's a hidden archive, a recording no one has dared to listen to until now. It reveals more than faces and routines. It reveals the mind, the silence, and the truth hidden behind years of silent terror. If you feel this tension, this need to understand, then you need to be there. Subscribing to the channel isn't just a gesture. It's becoming part of this, of the unfolding of each revelation, the echo of decisions, and the psychological impact that lurks around every corner. Each subscription helps keep the behind the scenes of these stories alive. Each click is a promise that the next file will be opened, that the next truth will be revealed, that nothing will be left out. And I guarantee, soon, very soon, you'll have access to something that has changed everything in the investigation. A contradiction found in records everyone thought were resolved. A detail that could overturn everything we thought we knew about him, the predator who seemed invisible. Stay with me because the next layer of this story isn't just about crime or technology, it's about the human mind, about choices and transformations, about what no one dared reveal. If you've ever felt the chill of realizing something has always been around you, unseen, then join this journey. Sign up. So that together we can open the archives that reveal what the city and time tried to erase, and delve even deeper into the truth that was always hidden but never distant. And while you decide, the recording remains there, pulsing, waiting to be discovered, showing that the red line has never been so close. The tension never lets up. The next move, the next revelation is already upon us. The silence inside the police station seemed denser than ever. The once discreet surveillance became increasingly present, a constant weight on the street, on everyday life, on every glance that passed unaware on the sidewalk. And then, finally, science spoke. Every strand of hair, every fragment of skin collected from discarded objects, became irrefutable evidence. DNA. A direct connection. The invisible had a face, a name no one suspected. The man who lived as a neighbor, as a co-worker, as someone who greeted the doorman with a mechanical wave, now faced a reality he could not deny. The psychological impact was immediate. For the investigators, for the victims' families, for everyone who closely followed every step of this slow and disturbing transformation. The monster's mindset, always camouflaged in everyday life, suddenly exposed. Every decision that had kept him hidden, every red line he thought he'd avoided, now reflected in the cold lights of the interrogation room. And I need you to feel this with me, to understand the weight of uncovering the truth hidden not in theory, but in the flesh 6 feet away. When the team entered his home, the atmosphere changed. There wasn't just evidence, there were echoes. Yellowed photos of places that should never be remembered, objects that carried silent memories, weapons too clean, as if every detail had been designed to create a narrative all his own. Trophies. A ritual of control and obsession, a logic only his mind understood. Each item spoke its own language, each photograph whispered a story the police weren't yet ready to hear. And you see how the truth unfolds in layers, how each revelation provokes not only shock but a moral weight that weighs heavily on those who observe. The first sensation is disbelief. A neighbor, a man you might have passed without noticing, is the epicenter of an invisible chaos. And this is the perversity of the human mind, the transformation of someone ordinary into a presence that manipulated fear and silence. This is where the psychological voyeurism intensifies. You ask yourself with that pang of regret and doubt, what if it had been me? What if, by chance, I had passed him by without noticing? Meanwhile, every wall of the house seemed to hold secrets that refused to speak. The team advanced cautiously, each step revealing a fragment of history that blurred reality and interpretation. The narrow hallway, the half-open door at the end of the attic, a cold light that only partially illuminated faces. And among the shadows, a sense that something was about to emerge, something that would change everything. This disturbing evidence was only the beginning, confirmation that his mind operated in dimensions the police could never imagine without exposing themselves. And then, behind a false wall, the unexpected. A tiny, carefully camouflaged space that contained more than weapons or objects. It contained fragments of intentions, personal rituals, hidden truths known only to him. Documents, clippings, maps, disconnected notes but charged with sinister meanings. Each discovery carried a profound emotional impact, a weight that could not simply be filed away or ignored. The realization of complete transformation. An ordinary, invisible man had created his own world of decisions, strategies, pain for others, but also reflections that no one could dismiss. And you, following this story, feel the tension growing. The sensation that reality merges with interpretation. The safe but inevitable voyeurism that forces us to question our own perception of what is normal. The walls weren't just physical barriers. They were the mirror of a mentality hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal its darkest side. Every object, every photograph, every trophy wasn't just evidence. It was narrative, a behind-the-scenes look at a mind operating in absolute silence. And here, just when you think you've seen enough to understand that you've grasped the extent of the fall, there's still something beyond, something the walls try to hide, something the logic of science and investigation can't yet fully decipher. It's a layer of truth that provokes unease, that mixes fear and curiosity, that defies the viewer's comprehension. And it's precisely there that the psychological danger lies, the certainty that the predator was always lurking, that what seemed enclosed still breathes among us, and that what lies behind the walls is more than just evidence. It's a silent invitation to face one's own vulnerability. And when the cold lights finally illuminate that secret space, you'll understand that the complete fall isn't just about capture. It's about the transformation of all of us who observe, about how our own decisions and perceptions intertwine with that which seemed distant but has always been lurking. History still breathes, still moves, still holds secrets that only the most attentive will be able to perceive, and what lies ahead will be an immersion no one can ignore. The courtroom was silent, heavy, as if the room itself was breathing heavily. Every glance, every whisper, seemed to carry the weight of decades of fear and uncertainty. The man who had previously crossed the street unnoticed now sat there, visible, exposed. The sharp sound of the judge's gavel, the voice announcing the sentence, cut like a cold blade, but what was in the air wasn't relief. It had never been relief. The conviction came with the clarity of formal justice, but the minds of everyone present were floating between the fragments of doubt that science and investigation had left incomplete. Transformation. The transformation of fear into revelation, but also the transformation of perception. A neighbor, a worker, someone you could pass on the street without imagining the horror they carried, now became a symbol of a mentality no one fully understood. His every decision, every planned action, every calculated red line seemed to echo in the collective consciousness, a silent impact no one could ignore. As the lawyers and investigators discussed the evidence, the feeling of emptiness grew. There were documents, photos, trophies, recordings, maps, notes, a hidden truth that was slowly revealing itself, but still, gaps remained that tightened the chest. Some family members looked at him, others looked away, and everyone somehow felt the presence of victims who would never be told, stories that formal justice could not reach. The feeling of psychological voyeurism that accompanied each spectator during this journey now intensified. You understand that you have observed something forbidden, yet intimate, and that the human mind can carry secrets that can never be fully deciphered. And it is in this space between the known and the unknown that discomfort arises. There is no relief, no redemption. The man is condemned, but history that led us through cold corridors, half-open doors, and silent hidden archives, continues to pulse in its own shadow. Justice has fulfilled its role, but the void that remains is greater than any sentence. The psychological impact of what happened, the weight of his decisions, and the effect they had on all of us still reverberates, like an echo that cannot be erased. Secrets were taken to the grave, or will remain hidden in the walls of those houses, in discarded objects, in trophies hidden in corners no one dared explore. Every clue that didn't fit, every detail overlooked, every victim never found remains lingering. The final sensation isn't one of closure. It's one of suspension, of waiting for something that may never come, of the awareness that the full truth cannot be known without crossing boundaries few would dare to face. And here, as you absorb every fragment, every shadow, every question mark that the courtroom and prison left behind, I need you to realize something. The story isn't over. There are files that haven't yet been opened, recordings that contain echoes of decisions, contradictions that don't add up. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next isn't just another detail. It's a glimpse into his mind, a foray behind the scenes into what society has never seen, revelations that challenge your perception of what you consider safe or predictable. You realize deep down that the horror lies not only in the act, but in the mystery's continuity. In those gaps left, in the walls that conceal more than they seem, in the decisions never revealed. The truth is fragmented, and each piece we find is merely a layer of a reality that refuses to present itself whole. There are moments when reality and interpretation blur, when the spectator's safe fear mixes with empathy and regret, when you ask yourself, what if it were me? Because reality is cruel in its most silent form. It's not just the crimes, not just the trophies or the records. It's the awareness that an ordinary man was capable of creating his own world of rules, decisions, and impacts that no one could fully understand. That every gesture, every choice, every silence carried a logic known only to him. And yet, part of that logic remains inaccessible, hidden in dark corners, behind walls no one dared to open. And as you feel the weight of this truth, the strange feeling of emptiness that sets in is no accident. It's the effect of what hasn't been revealed, of what remains hidden, of what will perhaps never be understood. There's a constant suspense, a silent tension that creeps out of the courtroom, that doesn't dissolve with the sentence, but continues to shape us, to confront us, to challenge us. Because in the end, the uncomfortable outcome isn't about complete justice. It's about the knowledge that the truth, perhaps, still lies buried somewhere no one has dared to look. And you, who have witnessed every fragment of this story, feel it. You feel the emptiness, the impact, the transformation this journey provokes. But between what is known and what remains hidden, there is room for more. Revelations, hidden archives, contradictions that challenge the perception of all who observe. And it is in this space that we continue, together, exploring behind the scenes, investigating decisions, walking through half-open doors, always with a red line, always with the feeling that something else is about to emerge. And now, if you've made it this far, it means you've walked through every shadow, every silence, every half-open wall with me. If you feel the weight of this, if you felt the tension, then leave a comment with the phrase, "I'm with you until the end." I want to feel that you were here, that you shared this thread of curiosity and safe fear, that you walked through these silent doors with me. As you write, think about the impact of each revelation we've seen together, the decisions that shaped lives and secrets that still remain hidden. If this storyline resonated with you, give it a like. It's not just a gesture, it's a silent pact of belonging. You and I, witnesses to what no one dared to face. And if you want to continue on this path, there's a video right here that complements this topic, exposing more behind-the-scenes details, more hidden truths and contradictions that no one talks about. Click and stay with me there. Because what we've discovered so far is just one layer. What follows will delve deeper, revealing details that change your perception of everything you just watched.